Hi there, it's Jen from modernmedicinelady.com and the Empathic Woman System, and the word of the day is risk. And I choose this word because I was talking with a client of mine about how important risk is in terms of being able to go after our dreams and to be able to create a life that we want to live, and how there's this incredibly fine balance between the part of us that is waiting for the right moment to take a chance, and also procrastination or hesitation. And she was commenting about how she sees herself as somebody who's kind of risk avoidant. She doesn't really like risk. She prefers sure things. And I was saying to her how, for me, being willing to take a risk does not mean that I'm not scared. Being willing to take a risk means for me that I am willing to feel the fear and do it anyway, and also that I am willing to fail, that I'm willing to try something and discover that maybe it doesn't work the way I expected it to. And one of the things that's been incredibly important for me is learning how to recognize that when something doesn't work, instead of interpreting it as a disaster or a failure, looking at it as an opportunity to adapt, looking at it as an opportunity to course correct, and sort of seeing it as feedback instead of failure. So always looking at it as basically, if something isn't working, then something needs to shift, something needs to be adjusted, and I can look at what needs to be adjusted in order to go forward. So I was really thinking just about so many different aspects of what it means to take risk and what it means to follow our dreams and go after our goals, and that sense of timing, of recognizing when it's the right time. And I was thinking about this idea of, learning how to surf, and how in many ways knowing how to ride a risk is very similar to knowing how to surf a wave. That at first we may not be able to recognize when the timing is right, and we may not really know how to get it to carry us to shore. But over time we can start learning how to recognize that moment when it's the right time, so that we're not getting on too early, and we're also not like bypassing it or trying to get on too late and missing the wave. But that only happens with practice. That only happens with sort of trying little things, one thing at a time, and learning to get comfortable with discovering that something doesn't work, and adjusting and adapting and going forward, as well as learning how to feel when that wave is at that sweet spot where we can ride it as far as we possibly can. And there's something about just doing it over and over and over again that teaches us how to recognize that sort of symbolic, metaphoric wave that's about following our bliss in life. And so I was actually telling my client the other day about one of my very early experiences with risk and actually feeling the fear and doing it anyway, and how it made such a huge difference for me. And what I realized was that in the same way that a negative experience can define us and can define our sense of the world, it can create our whole narrative about how safe we feel in the world, there also can be incredibly positive experiences that we have that form a deep core sense of who we are and what we are. And in my case, I realized that I had this experience when I was like in about 5th or 6th grade with my friend Caroline. And Caroline was a total jock. She was such a badass, and she was like fearless. She had 2 older brothers who basically like raised her up right, and she had no fear whatsoever. And she was like she was this athlete, she was a figure skater, she was a field hockey player. She was just a wild woman. Even when she was like 11 or 12 years old, she was just amazing. And the thing was, Caroline lived on a hill, and her backyard and every other house on the hill's backyard sort of faced down this huge hill, and she was about midway down the hill, with her backyard being like the hill. And at every single house there was like a retaining wall between one house and the next. And so when she and I were kids, she basically convinced me we would take a toboggan to the very top of the hill. And then what we would do is she convinced me to basically, she steered, I would get behind her, and then we would ride the toboggan from the top of the hill all the way down to Main Street in my town where I grew up, or to the retaining wall right before Main Street, actually, so that we, and fortunately the land, it leveled off right before the road, so we sort of stopped just before we fell off the wall and went into the main traffic. But the thing was that, and this was a wild ride because it was basically like this major, like it was like a block long length of a hill, and there was something like 5 or 6 houses with hills and retaining walls, but I think we would go down about 4 of them by the time we get to the bottom of where we were going. But anyway, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it was daunting. The first time I looked at it, it scared the living crap out of me. It was wild. And I remember looking at it and thinking about it and being scared, like I was not sure I could handle it. And she invited me to take that risk. She invited me to step beyond my fear. She acknowledged the fear, and then she basically was like, yep, and, so what? Like, who cares? Just do it. And I remember the part of me that had that willingness to take the invitation, the part of me that was willing to feel the fear and do it anyway, and got on the back of that toboggan and took that first exhilarating ride down that hill, where I knew I had stepped out of my comfort zone and I was going down that hill, and nothing happened. We were completely fine. We didn't wipe out. She was actually really good at steering a toboggan, and we had a blast. And then, that meant that I got to do it again, and I got to experience that, and I wasn't afraid of doing that again. And the thing is that that moment in my life was not just about riding a toboggan from the top of a hill to the bottom of a hill. It was about the fact that I did something that told me I could be bold. It was about the fact that I did something that told me that I had courage that I didn't even know I had, and that I was able to feel fear and do something anyway, that fear didn't have to stop me, and that it didn't have to debilitate me. I could still go for it. I could still try it. I could still do it. And in a lot of ways, that experience helped me to recognize that I had a bold streak in me, that I had a part of me that was fearless, and that I had a part of me that also, even though I could feel fear, I could still do something even if I was scared. And that has served me so well through my entire life, because that moment was just as solidifying and just as powerful in defining my sense of self as so many of the other negative moments that happen in life. And because of it, I feel like I have lived a life where I've been willing to risk and willing to potentially fail and try it anyway, and then adapt accordingly, because I got on that toboggan so many years ago. So my question for you right now is, number one, are you risk aversive? Are you risk avoidant? Or are you somebody who has a certain boldness about you and are willing to feel the fear and do it anyway? And have you ever had a moment where your toboggan moment, where you got on the back of something or whatever it was, and you knew you were scared, you felt the fear, and you did it anyway? And if you haven't, what would it take for you to try that? What would it take to be like, you know what? I'm scared, but I'm going to try this anyway. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to step outside of my comfort zone. So, because, as long as we're living, as long as we're breathing, it's never too late to be bold. It's never too late to try something and to just experiment, especially when it comes to riding the wave and taking a more calculated risk. Now, I'm not talking about gambling. I'm not talking about taking your 401k and like going to a casino and using up and, spending all of your money on, blackjack or something. I'm talking about those kinds of things where the risk is calculated, it's fairly safe, and it's a lot more about the interior and internal fear than it is necessarily about, something that really is stupid. So I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'd love to hear about your experiences with taking risks, and especially, what has helped you to be bold in your life. So please leave a comment below. And until next word of the day, I'm wishing you peace and ease and bold, courageous willingness to go after your dreams. So I'll catch up with you later, and in the meantime, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Jennifer Moore, Modern Medicine Lady, and I'd be ever so grateful for you to pass this video along to other people who would find it interesting. Thank you so much, and until tomorrow, peace.